So welcome to the Ketriana Yvonne show. Today's guest is Sekou Writes, and he is someone you would find out about in a couple of minutes. And it may take some time because he is an extraordinary person doing a multitude of things. So welcome, Sekou.
Well,
How are
thanks.
you?
Thanks for the dope intro. I hope I can live up to it, and I'm doing
You
well.
are, you are. You're
Yeah,
entitled. Just go with it.
thank you. I appreciate
I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong.
it. Amen. Amen and Ashe.
So, and usually, I think I met this young man about, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 5 years ago. At that time, he was writing a book, and it was at a reading. And he also was a car tester. And through the years, he has evolved into so many other things that this hour we will be discussing those things and getting an update from him.
Yeah.
So take it from the top and tell us who you are, how it happened, and what you want us to know.
So my name is Sekou Writes, and I do a lot of different things. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I consider myself a writer most of all, but what type of writing varies. As you mentioned, I'm an author. I've got 3 books out under my name. I also ghostwrite books, so there's some other books out there that don't have my name on them. I've written a play. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point.
Right.
I've written songs, articles. You mentioned car testing. Yeah, I've written a bunch of test drive reviews, movie reviews, celebrity interviews. Just about you name it, I've written it.
Right.
So that's
Right.
kind of the broad overarching category of Sekou.
Okay. So tell me, how did originally, when everything started, and there's a couple of things you did not mention, but I'll mention those.
Yeah.
And so originally, I know you went to Morehouse, right? And you studied writing, right?
So I actually did not study writing. Everyone thinks that I did. Everyone thinks that I was a
Oh, you went somewhere else and studied writing. No?
yeah. So at
Okay.
Morehouse, I was a political science major, and as I was gathering things for graduation, I realized that 100% of my extracurricular activities were writing related. So I was doing
Right.
that to apply to grad school. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. None of my extracurricular activities were political science related. And I was
Right.
like, oh, well, I guess I want to be a writer. I kind of backed that way. I wasn't thinking I wanted to be a writer, but then I looked
Right.
at my resume. I was like, maybe that's what I want to do. And
Right.
so I made the decision to finish out my degree in poli sci, but pursue writing. So then, yeah, I did get a master's degree in MFA in creative writing at the New School in New York. So that was
Okay.
my writing degree.
Okay. Right. And so when you got your degree, had you already written a book or?
Yeah, actually, I was promoting my first book when I entered grad school. As a matter of fact, I delayed coming to grad school for a year because my book tour had just started and I wasn't sure how the workload was going to be promoting a book,
Mhm.
being on tour, and also engaging in grad school. So I put it off for a year and then went off into the world and did the book tour, and then came back and went to grad school and started working on, my later books in grad school.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what was your later book?
So I've got 3 that are out. I would say that I've edited 3 books. So my
Hmm.
first book was called When Butterflies Kiss. It's a very interesting concept. I got it from Agatha Christie. She used to have these soirees way back in the day where she would invite writers to sit around and they'd each write one chapter of the same story. And I thought that
Okay.
was a very cool idea. And I wanted to do that with Black writers. And I wanted to
Hmm.
create the first book that was done that way for Black writers. So that's how When Butterflies Kiss was created. I wrote chapter 1. I handed it to the next writer who wrote chapter 2 with and then we handed both of those chapters to the third person who read chapter 1 and chapter 2 and then wrote chapter 3. And that's how the whole book was created. And it came back around to me and I wrote the final chapter. And so I have to say it ended up being a story about love in a way. It ended up being a story about a Black man who is trying to make himself a better person through his relationships with love and women. So I say it that way because you can't predict what a story will be when you just hand it
Right.
around from writer to writer. So
Right.
I'm very excited about what that book came to be. So that's book number 1. I was hired by a nonprofit in New Orleans to curate a collection of essays from people who had survived Hurricane Katrina and had moved back to New Orleans to help rebuild the city.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the next book. And then I published a collection of my short stories. That first book, When Butterflies Kiss, was classified as erotica, even though it wasn't really. And so because it was, I got all these invitations to write erotica by folks like Zane. And I was like, well, I don't really do that. But then I thought, what can I do that's kind of in that vein? So
Uh-huh.
I wrote stories that were kind of cerebral and thoughtful, much more about thoughts than about physical actions. And I wanted to see if that would work. And that worked for the various anthologies, the people that asked me to write erotic fiction. And then I compiled those stories and added some new ones, and I published that myself. And that's called The Sound of Silk at Midnight.
Okay.
Those are my three
I
books.
think that's where I came in and met you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So every once in a while, that book has been out for a while, but every once in a while, at least once a year, I try to promote the book and let people know that it's out there, that it exists, that I still have an author in my title.
Well, I mean, when you add on playwright and all of that, it's all the same. It's all writing. So
Yeah, yeah, I'll take it.
yeah. So that's cool. So, and that's interesting. You spoke about an anthology in collaboration. I was just recently talking to someone about, I think my last interview, about my one collaboration and how that's a very interesting process where you really don't know what you're going to end up with. And it kind of takes you to another place, or two people to another, or however many people, where like I ended up writing, it was a poem, but when I collaborate, like a person, they wrote one part, I wrote another part. And in the end, I was like, wow, this is really cool. This could be an opera. This could be a play. So that right there for me was like, wow, how did I, I would have never sat down and said, I'm going to write an opera. But to collaborate, you just don't know what you're going to end up with. And so, it was a little exciting. And, I've worked with some other artists, and it's like, oh, to do some poetry with, to their artwork, but it hasn't happened yet. So I probably have to just take that on and just do it
Yeah,
myself.
make it happen.
But it's interesting what creative minds come up with when they collaborate. So that's you know, that was interesting to
Yeah,
hear about. That
absolutely.
sound like a cool project.
Matter of
So
fact, the title of the book refers to that. People think the title of the book is about the work, but really it's
uh-huh.
about the fact that this is what happens when writers or creative spirits or butterflies come
hmm
together or collaborate or kiss. And so
hmm
the title
Right.
describes how it was created, but the writers were so good that they were able to weave elements of butterflies and kissing into the book.
Wow.
And so it
Okay.
seems like
That's cool.
that's the title of the book in terms of the content. So yeah, it was a very cool project. I will say that in chapter one, I wrote about a couple. They were on what? Not a couple, a man and a woman who had just met and they were on the phone. And I expected the book to be a love story between the two of
hmm
them, and it was completely not that. As soon as I got chapter two back, I was like, oh, okay, we're going in a completely different direction from what I intended. And so yeah, you have to kind of let go of your own preconceived notions, your own ideas about where you want things to go, and just
Right.
surrender to the force and see what happens.
Right, right. I like that. Even I think for me, sometimes I have like little mishaps. Like, you write something and then I'm like, it disappeared, or I get to the end and it's gone. And I think, and I haven't been writing as long as you. I don't think, actually, I wasn't even a writer when I met you.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and it goes to show how things quickly kind of change. And it's like, so anyway, it's like sometimes I'll write and get to the end and it's gone. And then I started hearing other people say that, and I said, okay, it's a thing. And I just surrendered to it, because it's always when I think is something that's like the greatest thing I ever wrote. And I'm like, and then this happened. And you could get really upset, or you could just say, I just say the universe just didn't want that, even though I thought it was great. And I let it go and I'm okay with it. And I'm going to work with that one. It may be me and I could have done this and that. But being that I started hearing other people had the same problem. And then people, well, it's usually like working on a a form, like a Google form.
Yeah.
And some of those things is like you can't go back, you can't save it, and it just gets to be difficult. So I
Wow.
do the best I can. I
Yeah.
work with the universe and take instructions, and I'm like, okay, I got you. I gotta do something else now. And I can never go back and like remember it to, write it exactly the same. So I'm like, okay, so maybe it wasn't that message. It's supposed to be something else. And I accept that. And I'm not gonna fight it.
Right.
So
That's the most
I
important part.
also okay, because we didn't even talk about the bracelets.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if you mentioned it. Maybe you did.
I didn't.
It's
I didn't.
it's so many things that we might forget a couple of things,
Yeah.
but I'll try to keep up with you. So I was just reading the one that I think it was a collaboration also, the Stones. You were talking
Oh,
about the
yeah.
broken, yeah. I don't
So
know if you memorize what you wrote. Did you
no,
have that? Okay.
no, I
I
haven't.
think I tried to, but I'm not even gonna go look for it. But I like that so much. So and it reminded me of, I guess I like blue and the blues, and sometimes those are words I incorporate into my writing. And
Right.
then I'm looking at the Stones. So I just needed to know because now you said that the Stones were um broken.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. I make
Okay.
bracelets.
Yeah.
I didn't mention that earlier. I fell into it. It took me a while to accept that the universe was leading me in the direction of making jewelry, specifically bracelets. So it took me a while to accept that. And once I
Right.
accepted it and I started making bracelets, they're really nice gemstones
Mm-hmm.
that I like to use for other people. But there's always, in a batch of gemstones, there's always those gemstones that are a little broken, that aren't quite as perfect. And I usually save those for me to make my own bracelets. And
Mm-hmm.
I like those because they remind me that life is not perfect. There are bumps and dips
Right.
and ebbs and flows. And so, because I do that, I've made them a little popular. Now people are interested in my. I used to call them ugly bracelets, and now that name is evolving. Um,
Uh-huh.
I I have a I have trouble pronouncing the Japanese uh, art that I'm
Mm-hmm.
basing it on now. I think it's kintsugi. But their
Mm-hmm.
art is they take if they have pottery that's broken,
Right.
they will fix the pottery by mending the broken pieces with gold, and so they come out beautifully. And there's that idea of it's even more beautiful because it's broken, and so that's the idea that I have with those bracelets. I use the broken stones because the pain and the suffering that you go through makes you
Right.
beautiful. It makes you stronger. So
Right.
all that said, I made one of these recently, and yeah, as you mentioned, there was a blue stone as a centerpiece, and I put it on social media asking for people to throw out names, and it really spoke to people because I got a lot of names, but all the names were very poetic, and I strung those names together into a poem, which again spoke to people. The poem spoke to people separately from the bracelet, and so that was pretty cool. I think I'll continue to do that to ask people for
Mm-hmm.
of jewelry. But yeah, it was a cool experience. I haven't memorized it yet, but it's something that I
Right.
plan to add to my repertoire.
Okay.
Very
And
cool.
with your permission, maybe I'll just say it at the end of this.
Oh
If
yeah,
you
sure, sure.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm glad you gave me the backstory because I was like, I'm looking at, the stones, and I'm like, these stones, they look perfect to me. I'm like,
Yeah,
what broken stones? So
yeah,
it's good to know all of that
yeah. And some of
because I
this
was,
imperfections are very slight, and some are more pronounced.
mhm,
And of course, I've gotten very
right.
good at taking photos now of bracelets.
Uh-huh. And I understand that because I collect owls, and a lot of times people would give me like a little small one, and I don't know what would happen. A wing would break.
Right,
Okay. So after a while, to me, that gave it more meaning because I'm like, we all fly with a broken wing. We still fly.
right.
And I don't get rid of them. And then even what you mentioned about um the Japanese
Yeah.
I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but it's also interesting in the Chinese culture. Like when you break something, it's considered like, how we would mend things,
Mm-hmm.
but they consider that to be like you get rid of it. And I had
Mm.
started like just getting rid of stuff instead of fixing it.
Mm.
So it's interesting that different things have different meanings. And
Yeah.
for me, like I said, I just accepted if I broke a wing, that it was still good because
Right.
it kind of represented us or me, and that, you could still fly with your broken wing.
That's
It
right.
doesn't mean you have to be have to get rid of you.
That's right.
So,
Keep
you
flying.
know, I guess through life, everything takes on some kind of new meaning, and I guess that has to do with like growing and taking the time to give it meaning, instead of just judging everything and accepting. Um, it takes a little bit of time just to think about why things happen and what it means to you and how you can make that work.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're a testimony to that because I think most of the things that you have done, like, even your play, you wrote that a while back, and, your hoodies and how everything, I don't think you had intentions for what it ended up being,
Yeah.
but it'll take you where you're supposed to go once you just like grab it. So I think that you are a testimony to this in action. So I
Okay.
don't know what the what word I would give for you, but it is like a delight to see like people in action, and especially when like I didn't really know that much about you, but the parts that I mentioned, and I know that this was all new because you was telling the story as it was going on, and to see like a period of growth for a person, and what it ends up being to other people.
Yeah.
So that's like a true testimony. And I thank you for that, to just keep going forward to that and passing it on and making a difference in the lives of other people.
Well,
So,
thanks. I
and
appreciate
that's
that.
why you're a guest today.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would just throw it back to something you said earlier. You were talking about being in communication with the universe and just letting it
Right.
flow through you in terms of writing. And so I've been fairly good at that. And as I
Mm,
mentioned with bracelets, I resisted it for a while.
right.
Fought it, but
Right.
ultimately I've been fairly good at saying, all right, well, the universe is pushing me towards this thing. Let me accept and see where it takes me. And
Right.
so most of the things that I've done, it looks like I've fallen into it because
Right.
something came out of nowhere, and at some
Right.
point I pivoted towards it instead of away from it. Even if I
Right.
started off pivoting away from it, ultimately
Exactly.
back towards it.
And I'm sure you can remember like the first moment of resistance on any of these projects. Like I remember like it's something that's unusual, like things that you don't resist and you just do, that happens. But then it's things that are new to you that come up where you say to yourself, but I don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you have this conversation with yourself. And that's like the pivotal moment where you have to make a decision. And okay, let me just follow this, or let me deny it. And
Right.
it's I think if you think back, you'll see the story of each time. Okay, what was the resistance and what was the acceptance, and then what happened?
Oh, for
You
sure.
know?
I don't have to
Yeah.
think at all. Like like for example with the bracelets, we talked about that. So what had happened was I was trying to raise money for the social justice project,
Hmm.
and it got written up in a bunch of places, including Huffington Post. And Huffington Post said, "Well, when you give to the project, it's a great project.
Right.
Check it out, but just beware that when you give to the project, when you make a donation, you don't get anything physical in return." And I was like,
Right.
"Oh, well, I can fix that." So I hired a friend of mine to make bracelets. He was already making bracelets. I was like, "Make me bracelets for this project." And so I was buying bracelets from him and then giving them away to people who donated to my project, which
Hmm.
which ultimately became Brown Boy Mad. So there was a that's there's another link there.
Right.
But that became cost prohibitive because I'm spending money to buy them and I'm giving them away. And then I started trying to sell them. It just over time, I just realized I needed to drive the price point for me down so that I could have a little more wiggle room in terms of how much money I was spending. So that was really it. I was like, let me just figure out how to drive the price point down. And I asked everybody I knew to make me bracelets, and everybody said, yeah, they do it, but then it wouldn't work out for whatever reason. and I started watching YouTube videos about how to make bracelets. But still, this was very purpose driven. I wanted to
Uh-huh.
make a bracelet to raise money for this social justice project. So once I was able to do that, people started asking me to make other bracelets for other things. Just make me a
Right.
bracelet. I said, no, I'm not making no bracelets. I'm not a bracelet maker. And I had a whole attitude about it, right? And I carried that on
I'm
for
a
a while.
writer.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I'm a writer. I got an
I'm a
MFA.
car. I drive cars.
I drive cars. Ain't nobody making no bracelets. But people
Hmm.
keep bringing it up. And so finally I was like, well, let me just make one, you know? And it snowballed and it has led me into all these spaces that I can't imagine having discovered if I hadn't been making
Right.
making bracelets. And so I'm grateful for the experience, but it took a
Bracelet
while.
maker.
Yeah, but it took me a while. I was fighting it for a minute, for a
Oh my
significant
goodness.
amount of time, but I'm glad I made the pivot. It's been lovely.
Wow. Yeah, and then you had a whole story with the fasten part,
The
the
clasps
hook.
on the
Yes.
bracelets, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So there are a number of stories wrapped around the jewelry making thing. Like, there was the decision of whether or not I'm going to expand beyond bracelets and, dabbling here and there, what the materials would be. I started off with bracelets that have an elastic band, which is
Hmm.
beaded bracelets with an elastic band that you see everywhere. And what I discovered is that my quest to make the bracelet more indestructible for me ended up attracting customers because they're
Hmm.
like, oh, those are interesting. But I was really just trying to make them so that they wouldn't break so often for me. Like I remember I
Right.
was going through a turnstile in New York
Right.
for the train, and the bracelet popped and
Right.
beads went everywhere. I got strangers helping me, and I was like, I don't want to do that again. Like I want to make
Right.
something that's pretty much indestructible. And me doing that led me to working with stainless steel. The bracelets are strung on a steel cable, and the clasp is stainless steel now. It's a big, heavy, oversized clasp that's strong and has weight to it and doesn't tarnish. So, whether you have it for one day or 10 years, it looks the same. It's still shiny and pretty. And so
Right.
again, my quest to make something better for me ended up creating something that was better for other people. And so yeah, it
Great.
evolved. It all evolved.
Right. And that's good because yeah, that happens. It's like I know someone gave me a bracelet, with the chakras, and
Yeah.
she was all excited. I had the bracelet a good day, and I had it on. Next thing I know, the pieces were all over the place, and I'm like, oh my God. And it was like I had to tell her, oh my God, I know you gave me this bracelet, but it popped. And people give me jewelry, and I'll have it a while, and eventually, like I have this one, I think is cool. Um,
Nice.
this I just bought this from a vendor on the street, and I've had it, I guess maybe 2 years. It hasn't broken yet. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
great.
yeah. So maybe it's the stone. Maybe it's the little stone.
And
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 this was like,
also
uh-huh.
women tend to be easier on jewelry than guys. We just kind of toss them around. We beat them up.
Right. I don't think it's like what you said. It's like you have it on, and next thing you know, it gets hooked on something, and that's it.
Mhm.
Or you wear it a lot, and the it just wears out. It just wears out and eventually pops, so it gets really loose. So for you to take the time to try to solve the problem that was for yourself is not only for yourself. That's everyone's problem.
Right.
So, and that's why I kind of remember the little story with that, and I thought that was cool. So yeah, so you did that,
Yeah.
and
And I
then that.
ended up, so to just to put a period on that, I ended up using what's called shackle clasps. And I was like, oh, that's great. They're actually called shackle clasps. And so I can make these bracelets that much more symbolic. So
Right,
yes, I'm using a shackle clasp, but the symbolism is about overcoming your own shackles, overcoming the
right.
things that hold you back in your mind, being mindful of that. So it's not
Hmm.
just something pretty. It's not just something that has the vibrations of the various stones. It's also a reminder to work on yourself, work on your mind, and free yourself from your shackles. Free your
Wow.
mind, as they say
Hmm. Okay, so all of these, would you say that through your growth in the past year or the past 2 years, like all this little wisdom that you're passing along, would you say that this came about doing these projects where you learned all these lessons and you can make all these symbolisms? Or would you say that 2 years ago you would have had a reason for everything you did or made it work? Um,
No, so I feel like, so you mentioned earlier having to, reflect on life and
mhm,
make choices about why that happened and what the
right,
purpose was. The thing is, most people don't do that. Like, you have to
right,
choose to look.
right,
Like, the things happen to you regardless, but you have to choose to examine them and find the lesson. And so I think what happened for me is, yeah, I was having all these experiences that were adding to the storehouse of me. But it wasn't until, yeah, the past year or two when I started really focusing on personal development, really
right,
focusing on maximizing my potential, that all of a sudden they started going like this. All the things started fusing together. And I've had lots of comments recently about me being wise, for example, that I can't remember ever getting that compliment before in life. And all of a sudden,
uh-huh,
people are saying that often. But I feel like it's because I am gathering information for myself. Again, just like I've been kind of consumed with consuming information
right,
and and in the effort to make myself better. And I feel like
right.
in the process I've gathered the little nuggets from these different things that I've done and they're kind of coming together. So that's been my experience, that over the past couple of years it's been a kind of a warp speed acceleration in terms of my growth, even though the
Mhm.
things were happening all along.
Okay, great. Well, that's a good thing
Yeah, I'll
that
take
you
it.
took
I'll take it.
that you took a little break to just be insightful,
Yeah.
to get things moving in the forward, like I like to say, in the forward progression to keep moving wherever you're going to go next. And then, and I'm sure you can testify also to knowing that, like, in those deepest struggles, like setbacks and trying to figure things out, is when your greatest awareness happens that propels you to whatever the next thing is that you end up doing.
Yeah.
And had it not been for that challenge to come about, you wouldn't have had to figure it out and you would have just probably stayed, you know, level where you were.
Yeah, there's, I can't remember which author, but there's a book that talks about how tragedy cracks you open. And that,
Yeah.
even that phrase sounds harsh. It cracks you
Right.
open. Once you're
Uh-huh.
cracked open, you're all of a sudden open to other ways of thinking about things, other ways of doing things. And so you're willing to take in information and try different things. And so, yeah, if you're back to what we said earlier, if you're willing to look, if you're willing
Hmm.
to try something new, those times when you experience a challenge are the best times to accelerate your life.
Right.
Because what I've experienced is that the worse the experience, the more bulletproof you are right afterwards.
Hmm.
Well, what I mean by that is, like, so let's take my play, for example. We haven't even gotten to that yet, but let's just
Right.
touch on
But
that for
you
a
can take us there.
second. All right, so I'm gonna take you there for a second. So, like, I had written it, as you mentioned, a long time ago, and when I started moving it forward, this was, pre-pandemic, and there were a lot of fears bubbling up about the pandemic because no one knew what was going to happen. We're all used to it now, right? There's fear, but there's
Hmm.
not as much fear as in the beginning when everybody was like, "What is going on?"
Right.
And and in that space, I was still very much, I am doing this play. I don't
Right.
really care about whatever else is going on. I am doing this, and because
Hmm.
minded, I was able to accomplish getting the play mounted at Fisk University not once but twice. And it was the very final student activity at Fisk University before the campus was
Right.
shut down because of COVID.
Right.
But if I hadn't been focused in that way, that wouldn't have happened. I would have been distracted by everyone else's fear and indecision. And so I'm saying all that to say you can develop that kind of tunnel vision when you've experienced something that's hurtful, because you can take that
Hmm.
energy and tunnel vision on something else. And so all that to say that, yeah, these any challenging experience can be your jet fuel to propel you to the next thing if you use it. It's there, but you got to use it. You got to flip the switch on the jetpack. Otherwise, you just let
Right.
a jetpack that's just weigh you down.
Hmm. So going through all of that and remembering how it was in the beginning, and not that maybe last year was the first time you faced challenges, but to know or reflect on any other time that you faced a challenge. And like I can only say for my life is usually when things are it's like when things are just crazy going bad, like when you just like, okay, we're going in the wrong direction, how it pivots and goes like the stock market. You could, be down one day and next thing you know, stock is up. And that's somehow how life is. It's like you can get to a low, but you don't give up, or you just keep trying to figure it out, and then it propels to something else. And then when things are just kind of even, like for a period of time, it's like you're okay with things just being where they are, like, oh, no big catastrophe has happened, like your life doesn't really move, that much. You're okay, you're safe.
Hmm.
So for me, I guess after dealing with different things, it's like when my life is like that, I'm like, okay, like we need something. Like
Yeah.
we need something to happen, because I know that this is not, even though it seems comfortable and cool, that you know when things change. And so, not that I create that, well, I guess we all create whatever happens, but it's like I can recognize that. Like, not to say that when nothing happens, like it's okay to rest there for a little while, but then you also know that when the big things happen that take you somewhere else, it's because this thing that you probably didn't want to happen happened. Okay, it's like, say for example, myself, pandemic happened. um I have a job. I think the last time I was unemployed, I was starting a business. And then that's when I started to take class. I became a producer. That's when I became a writer. And the funny thing that I can relate to you about the jack of all trades is because that was a part of my story. And I took a writing class. No, I hadn't taken a writing class yet. It was like I took my first writing class, and that was cool. And then I took like all these classes at the library, with Brick or whatever I saw, I took it. I had time. And then this class came, and it was called Poetry to Image. And I'm like, that's when all of a sudden it wasn't easy for me to get to this class. And all of these, I'm like asking myself, why am I going to this class? I'm not a poet. And I almost didn't go. Now I went to like 12 other classes, no problem. It's snowing that day. I'm on the phone asking, after 15, I'll never forget this day, because it's like, well, after 15 people, they don't take you. And da 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 da, it's snowing outside. I'm already late. And I'm like saying to myself, like, why is all of this anxiety? I wouldn't even have known it was anxiety. So anyway, it was a whole bunch of back and forth with if I'm going to go to this class. So I make it. And I always think back now, if I didn't go to that class, like my life would, um, I don't know what it would be, but like I always say, being in using my creativity. I mean, I have been in the creative world, but not as I wasn't saying that I knew I was going to write a book, but I would have never said I was a poet. I wasn't a poet until I took this,
You
not
took
that
that
class.
class.
Then I took a workshop, and I guess everyone else, it was creative writing. I even had an argument about if it was poetry or creative writing, because I didn't know I was writing poetry. I was just writing. And everyone would just say, oh, she's a great poet, da da da. And I'm like, okay, so I'm a poet. And I just went with it. So yes, now I'm a poet. And then I became a producer. And that wasn't in the cards either, but it all was a part of it. So, one day I'm walking with a friend that I met in this poetry class, and she says, and I'm telling my stories, and she's like, you have great stories. You should write. So I say, ooh. I know the voice because that's my voice when I tell people what they should do. And if they listen to me, they'll be on their path. So, and I don't usually listen to people, but it was just like it was my voice. So I said, okay. And then I said, and she's so the jack of all trades. I think I said it. And for some reason, I couldn't even remember the second part of it. And so, and this was before podcasts and everything we're doing now. So we started, so I'm like, no, I really am a jack of all trades. And we couldn't think of the second line. So we ended up coming down the block asking strangers, what's the second? Nobody could say it, right?
No way.
And yeah, so I mean, we were coming from Grand Army Plaza on Flatbush all the way down to over by the Barclays Center. And then somebody else gave us another story. And I come upstairs, my father calls me, and for some reason, he says that line. And I'm like, oh my God, do you know, I was just, you know how something just leaves your mind?
Mhm.
So that came up. And you know, because I would say I'm a jack of all trades, but I am a master of, you know, of most. It's not because I don't have a typical life where I did the same thing all the time. I had various experiences in different industries, and now it's just like a mosaic collage of, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
And so that was interesting. So when I heard you saying it, I'm like, and so I don't know if you know that it's another part to it.
Yeah.
No, not the regular two. It's like maybe three other lines.
Oh, okay. No, hit me. What are the other lines?
I can't remember, but
Oh,
it's like when we use that term, we usually mean, you know, like somebody's jack of all trade, master of none.
right.
But it's actually a positive thing. It's like you're a master of most.
All
You know what
right.
I mean? It's not a negative thing. It actually full circle qualifying you as being you know, not like, you know, they say, yeah, master of all trades, master of none, whatever.
Mhm.
It ends up being a very positive quote. So look, that's your homework to look
Yeah, I
up
would look that
the
up.
full meaning of that. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, cool. I know what that means.
Yeah.
You know, it's and I, you know, I think that's a good thing. Like some people, like I'm sure when you try to explain, oh, I do this, that, and people look at you like, I remember a long time ago, I was trying to interview for a job and I was freelancing. This was way back. And it was at to teach makeup at a modeling agency. And I had like uh, my own business selling jewelry and a business called Fashion Finds. Hard to fit, hard to find. So I would find stuff that people were looking for. And so I'm telling the lady, and then I had a makeup line back then. And I'm telling the lady all this stuff. And she's like, well, it sounds like, you know, like you're too busy. And I'm like, no, don't worry about that. I can do it. I can figure
Right.
out like my schedule, you know, but
Right.
when people, I guess they're so used to like 9 to 5 and what they want you to focus. And this was a freelance job in the evening on various days and the schedule changed. But that was my life. You know, it's
Mm.
like, okay, I had all these little 3 hour time slots for different things I was doing and I could make it work. But it was funny because I remember like I had to tell her, no, like you can't tell me like what I can do. And you know, to defend, not that you're all over the place, it's just that to accept that your mind just doesn't work like everyone else. Everybody doesn't have the same experience,
That's
you
right.
know, so you
That's
got
right.
to do it, do more. And
Yeah.
you know, it's no explanation or to say that, you know, you know how some people they're just kind of in a conservative space, I'll say.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, that was that story. That was, yeah, I share that with you.
Yeah. So
So
for the
uh-huh,
people who are watching this who don't know what
uh-huh,
you're referencing, for me, I was recently talking about being a jack of all trades on this show that I
right.
produce. It's called
That you
yeah, I'm
now this
uh,
is I am
yeah,
Reverend Melissa,
yeah.
that I
It's
didn't even when I made the comment the other day and I don't know when I just saw it today that she wanted you to co-host. So I mean, to host. And
Yeah,
I'm like, look at that. Now, see, this was just a couple of days ago.
yeah, yeah.
You
That
was
was this
acting like you
Sunday.
didn't know what I was talking about. And
Yeah,
then I just happened to go to it and I'm listening and you're just popping off all these things
right.
about the mind and how this works. I said, now he's getting all scientific
Yeah, getting
and
all scientific with it. Yeah, for real.
and he
Because some of
yeah,
those
he's
things popped up when you were just talking. Like, yeah, it's in here now. It's just a kind of
yeah,
a part of the way I see the world. And
right,
one of those things is this really blew my mind when I learned it.
right.
And so I've been telling as many people as I can, but it's hard to
Uh,
grasp. It's like
uh,
that phrase that we hear all our lives: "You are your own worst enemy," and we hear it
uh,
all the time.
uh,
We don't really apply it. And
right.
so the
Preach.
application is your mind, the reptilian part of the brain is built for comfort. And
Right,
so it's always going to pull you back to comfort. And so
right,
anything that's really outside of your norm, it
right,
will convince you. It will offer up convincing, compelling excuses to keep you in this
right,
certain boundary to keep you comfortable.
right,
It doesn't care if you're happy. It just cares if you're
right,
comfortable. It wants to stay
right,
comfortable, which is terrifying, because it makes you realize that you have to actively push against your mind if
right,
you really want to accomplish something significant with your life.
right. And
Yeah.
that's what I meant about when things are just kind of even going and nothing is really changing. How after this happens for you, you recognize it. Okay, something got to change here. Like you have to do some. Well, the thing will come along that will create the change, but usually it's something that initiation that you take to start it. And as they say, as long as you make the step and everything else will come,
Yeah.
but you first have to make the move and not worry about how you're going to do it. It'll just create, come to you. But
And
yeah,
that's
that's
the most
exactly
important
what I was
part
talking
is
about.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's the most important part is taking the step, because not everybody takes the step, or not everybody takes the step all the time, right? Like you can
Right,
have something terrible happen to you and you can just wallow in it. You can
right,
hold
right,
on to whatever negativity that was for years. And I know I've done that in the past, and I'm pushing hard against myself to not do that in the future, to take
right,
every quote unquote negative experience and find the opportunity, find the growth, examine it, take a good look at it, and find the lesson that I can use
right.
to propel myself to the next level. But it takes
Hmm.
work. Like when people say doing the work, like that's
Uh-huh.
what it is. It's actually
Hmm.
work. You have to work hard.
Right.
So it's not
Yeah.
it's not living your best life. Doing the work is not the same thing as living your best life. Living your best life
Uh,
is like, going to brunch and then having a mimosa and chilling and having fun. Doing the
uh,
work is hard and uncomfortable
right.
and constant and daily, but it makes you a better person at the end.
Right. And eventually you'll get to do the brunch
Yeah, eventually you get to do the brunch in a
and
whole different
celebrate.
way. In a whole
Uh-huh.
different way. Right.
Yeah. Hopefully it's in celebration of all the things that you did the work for, and now you can actually enjoy and, celebrate and just think about what's next.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the,
Kevin Hart talks about, he has this line he says all the time: everybody want to be famous, nobody wants to do the work.
mhm,
And he had to do the people don't talk about it, but he had to do the work for so long, and he even
right,
has dyslexia, and
right,
so he had to work around these challenges to
right,
do the work for all that time. But yeah, now he can brunch, and he's still working, and he's
right,
still working very hard to keep himself at that level of success.
right. So okay. So tell me a little bit about your background though. So you're you're in Nashville now?
Yeah, so I was in Nashville when the world changed.
Okay.
I was in Nashville. I was working with Fisk on my play, Brown Boy Mad.
Right.
And as I mentioned, it was the last student activity before the school shut down because of COVID. And then my mom and my aunt are here. I'm kind of from Nashville. And so I decided
Okay.
to stick around and kind of shepherd them through all these changes. And
Right.
also it's been a good kind of incubator for me because yeah, I typically live in New York, but here in Nashville, I don't have nearly as many distractions. So I can
Right.
better tunnel vision on the things that I have been really focused on doing, which is
Uh-huh.
why so many people have been like, "Hey, you're doing so much." Like, yeah, well, I've got a lot fewer things to distract me. I'm really kind of just focused on promoting
Right.
and developing these things, not only myself, but these projects that I'm working on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm still in Nashville.
Right. Okay. So, but are you from New York or you from Nashville?
I'm more from Nashville. I'm not at all from New York, but I've been
Okay.
there long enough that people kind of think that I'm from there. But
Okay.
I'm not really from Nashville either. I was born in Boston and then I moved around a lot. My mom, my aunt, my grandparents are all deeply embedded in the Nashville community. Like I'm right now, I'm in the house that my great great
Great.
grandfather built. Like this
Okay.
old school Nashville roots. But in terms of schooling, I was only here for one school year. But I always
Uh-huh.
came back here. It's like home base. That's the best
Right.
way. It's been like
Right.
home
Right.
base.
You could still call it home,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
they would tell you you going home.
exactly.
They claim you, and I
Yeah,
know they claiming you now.
that's right.
So then you had like the big write up in the Nashville paper,
Yeah, a
and
couple papers here. Yeah.
mhm,
Y-
and then that I guess was a surprise to you, and
Yeah, yeah. It was surprising and also confirming in that
mhm,
in that I was really what I just said earlier, really doing the work, really tunnel visioning on this play and doing this work and promoting it. And yeah, there were a lot of things that happened. There were several articles about me in several papers in Nashville and other places. And I was also on TV here. And what was really fun about that is a couple of the students in my play were texting me when they saw me on TV, like, "Oh, there you are." They sent photos.
right,
And then I went to like, Kinko's, and the guy at the counter was like, "Weren't you just on TV?" So yeah, there was all this fallout from doing the work. And in my case, doing the work was being very laser focused on this play, which seems like it came after George Floyd, but didn't. This was something that I was working on at the beginning of the pandemic. But it is about social justice. It's about
right.
Black men in America. It's about being Black in a post-racial, quote unquote, environment that is not post-racial at all. And so it was really good timing for me to be working on that project.
Okay. So let's see. We did the bracelet, the book. Tell us a little bit about the test driving. How that.
Yeah, so again, I kind of fell into it. I was working at Uptown Magazine, and it was a very small staff at the time. So I ended up writing almost every section of the magazine. And one of the sections that we had was a car section. And so at some point, I started writing the car section, and it was just fun. I was
Right.
just writing about cars. And then one day I got an email from Ford saying, "Do you want to
Ah,
come test drive cars?" And I thought it was spam, to be honest with you. I was like, I don't.
okay.
How could that be real? How could that
Right.
be real? But then they got me on the phone. They were like, "Yeah, so do you want to come test drive the new car?" And I was like,
And which one was it?
"So I
Don't
think
say a
I
Mustang.
no, I think at the time it ended up being a Mustang later, but at the time it was an SUV, so probably the Ford Escape.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Ford Flex. It was the Ford Flex, which, by
Okay.
the way, people don't realize was named after Funkmaster Flex.
What?
Funkmaster Flex had a contract with Ford to develop cars, and so the
Wow.
Ford Flex is a long SUV, and it's
Mm-hmm.
long and low, and it's become very popular with the surfer culture because you could almost fit a surfboard in the back of the car, and that
Wow.
was the first vehicle, and then
Mm.
that's kind of snowballed into other things, and so it's just like
Mm-hmm.
somebody that writes about refrigerators, for example.
Uh-huh.
Like, you have to be exposed to the refrigerator so that you can write about them. So for a very long period of time, I've been exposed to new cars so that I can write about them. And
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And that's funny because I didn't know it was Ford, but Ford, I'm a Ford person because I'm not really a car person. But like I don't care. Like the first awareness for me to know what car I like was a Mustang. So it's like cars are cars to me. So it's been some years now. So it was a Ford Mustang convertible, and my head turned, and I was like, if that's the only car, it's like my head will turn. I love that car, and if I rent a car, I'm like, you have a convertible, and I'm very particular about how the car looks. Like I don't, it has to be low in the front, like not straight out, and I have all
right,
these little things. So Yeah, and I'm always telling people, no, I love, and I had a Ford. I guess my first car was a Ford Pony. They don't make them anymore. But that car was just like a hatchback that I could get anything in, and I drove it to death. And I just always liked Ford products, and I had like a Volvo before, and I'm like, that's supposed to be a good car, and I never saw a car, and these things happen. So I give it to Ford. I'll stick with them. I'm
That's
stock
cool.
doing my stock with Ford, so
That's
people
good. They
can
would be
do
happy to hear that.
their foreign cars all day. I'll stay with us.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. They would be
So
happy to hear that.
what's your favorite car?
So people ask me this all the time, obviously, and my answer varies. Like really, it's dependent upon the last thing I test drove in terms of like everyday drivers. But in terms
Hmm.
of ultimate vehicles, I really like Aston Martin as a brand. I remember the first time I test drove an Aston Martin, the woman asked me, "Have you ever test driven an Aston Martin? Have you ever driven an Aston Martin before?" I was like, "No," but now by that time I'd driven like a million cars, right? I was like, "No,"
Uh-huh.
but like, "No, no, 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 no. You haven't driven an Aston Martin. Let me show you some things." And I was still like,
Hmm.
"It'll be." Everything was different.
Uh-huh.
Everything was different. Like the door handle was different. The key was different. The how to pop the trunk was different. How to pop the gas tank was different. So I enjoyed the differentness of that experience, and so to this day, like I enjoy that as a dream car. The brand of Aston Martin is really dope. I
Okay.
mean,
See,
just the
I'm not
key
even
alone.
familiar with that one. I'm gonna have to go do some homework and see what you're
Oh
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah. So it's in that Porsche range. They're like
Okay.
quarter of $1 million.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're really expensive vehicles, but they are amazing. They are amazing. Just the key alone.
Uh-huh.
The key is a
Uh-huh.
piece of crystal.
What?
A piece of crystal. Like you take a piece of crystal and push it into the dashboard to start the car. It was just like, oh, come
Uh,
on. Come
So
on.
so now that most cars are keyless, do you know what the latest is for that? Do they use a key? Um,
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't driven a Aston Martin in a while, but it's like it's not a typical key. It's like art. It's like carrying a crystal in your pocket, and then
okay.
you basically rest the
Right. Like in
crystal
the
in the
movies
dashboard.
when you got the piece that fits and opens up everything else in the
Yes, it is that
another room.
exactly. I was
Wow, that's
driving around I was
yeah.
driving around a lot. So I'm like, just get in the
Got
car,
my
watch me
crystal,
start it.
my magic crystal.
Exactly.
But that sounds cool. So
It was
what do
very
you
cool.
think as far as like the future with electric cars? Um, are you in agreement with that? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, it's just inevitable. Self-driving
Mm,
cars are coming fast,
right.
and
Hmm.
I know because I've written about it. The general public isn't ready for it. It doesn't matter. They're just going to
Right.
phase
It's gonna
out.
happen anyway.
They're just going to phase out regular cars. They will drive up the insurance premiums for people who want to still self-drive. They'll make it,
Hmm.
you know, ridiculously expensive to drive
Right.
yourself. But it's coming
Hmm.
fast, and
Right.
if you've ever been in a Tesla that's doing its auto drive thing, like all you have to do is see it once to be like, oh yeah, this is happening.
Yeah.
Like
I think I
it's not
yeah, I think I watched the video and with all the cameras and how it just does everything. And I'm
yeah,
like, wow,
it's
okay.
pretty yeah. Like even for me, like I've been test driving cars for a long time. I've driven high end vehicles that had high technology, so I thought I understood what it would be like to be in a Tesla when it's doing the self drive thing. And then I got in it, and I was like, oh no, this is an entirely different level. Like this is an entirely
Mhm.
different world. So that's where things are moving. It's moving towards that movie Minority Report when everyone's sitting in a car reading the paper and having coffee, and then they just arrive at their destination.
Wow.
So we're going to have that. We're going to have that travel time as productive time to do with whatever you want. It's coming.
Wow.
It's coming.
Okay. So what part haven't we touched on and what is it that you would want people to know? Maybe what you're doing next. I
Yeah,
know
this we haven't talked about this.
okay, well tell us.
And then that's I think the most important. Well, the most important thing for me right now is hero
Uh-huh.
relief. once again, it's something that I kind of fell into. I
Okay. I can't. I don't know what you could do. Let's see. You have another one that's like, well, you would have to get up. It's okay.
what? You want to
Move
see it?
back a little bit so we can see it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
So here's the hero hoodie. Uh,
right.
hero is an
Okay,
acronym.
got you.
It means helping everyone reaps optimism.
No.
I created that acronym because there was an article about me that called me a hero, and I was like, "Ooh, that feels big. That feels big. Let me turn it into an acronym." And
Uh-huh.
then I created these hoodies to donate to the unhoused. I learned how I learned to call them the unhoused and not the homeless through working with that community. And so my goal was to give brand new hoodies to the unhoused at this event called Hoodies for the Homeless. It's an annual event here in Nashville. And my original goal was five, and then it went up to 10, and it kept going up because people kept supporting it. And I ended up showing up with 55 brand new hero hoodies and then 117 hoodies total. And so it just kind of took on a life of its own. And I'm continuing to do that work. My goal is to provide more and more brand new hoodies for the unhoused, because what struck me at that very first event is that even though I had more used hoodies than I had hero hoodies, they wanted the hero hoodies because they were brand new, because they were so
Hmm.
classic, and because it's been a very long time since they had something that was just for them. So I'm
Right.
very excited about that work. And the way it works is you buy a hoodie for you, and then I automatically give one to the unhoused. So it's a buy one, gift one, or go get
Buy one,
gift one.
get yeah, buy one, gift one.
Yeah. So the website is giveherohoodies.com, and I'm very excited about the work that I've been able to do there. I've done hero hoodie drops in multiple cities down here in Nashville, obviously, but also in Memphis, Tennessee, also in Louisville, Kentucky, at women's shelters. So the work is growing, and I'm just happy to be able to do it, and be happy to be able to give back in such a memorable way for them, an
Wow.
impactful way. So I'm
Oh,
excited.
thank you for that.
Thanks for the
I'm,
thanks.
I will give appreciation for all the people that I know that are not here that have benefited from all the things that you're doing. We
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, I mean, it's extraordinary, like I said, to see people, I kind of follow people, I think I'm a good judge of character and talent and integrity and all of that. And so I think that my gift is usually I deem myself, and I don't have a problem saying it. Yeah, but to just see things or people and what they're doing and to try to just lift them and further in that. And so it's been like just having this show, that's what it's been about for me.
Mm.
And just like, I don't know what it means to other people, but I know when people come on my show, it's like I have been following them for a while because I met them and you just see what they're doing and is worthy of having a whole show for.
Well, that's great. So on
and
behalf of
as
all of
you
them,
and
I
as
thank
you
you.
can tell, it's an hour show,
Yeah.
but it's almost over.
Yeah. Go
And it's still not enough time because it's probably like five other things that you're doing that we didn't get to,
fast.
but in this short pace, attention span of people, you really can have a conversation and time fly and not
Mhm.
have enough time because
Right.
people like I don't have a problem because I can talk.
Mhm.
So it usually just feels like a regular thing for me to just sit down and talk to someone and time just goes fast. And I can't even imagine if I only had like 20, I guess it would be 26 minutes for a show. That wouldn't be enough time for me. But
Yeah.
I think at one point I was doing two people because when you ask like, is it just
Right.
me? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Just you.
Yeah, I think early on, I think I used to have two guests,
Mm.
and you did the whole break thing when that was before the method that we're using now. So,
Right.
but who knows what the future is going to be? But I'll be ready for it, and I think I'm yeah. So, anything else you want to let us know, or
Yeah. Just check me out on
in
social.
with okay? I like okay when I preach a little bit about the smile And I think I just heard that today. So I said,
Okay.
let me just, yeah. And when I was listening to you, and I said, oh, let me just, in that moment, just listen. I said, let me just, I just sat there and started smiling, right? So I said, let me just raise my vibration as much as I can. So just tell, in on that note and tell us that message that you was given
Okay.
and about the show that you're hosting.
Sure. So I'll do the show first. So
Uh-huh.
I am Rev Melissa has a show 6 days a week. It's called Sit with Rev Melissa. It's every day except Saturday. And she basically preaches 6 days a week, which is incredible because most
Hmm.
preachers are pastoring preaching once a week on Sunday.
Right.
But she's
Hmm.
preaching every day. These sips, she calls them. It's called spirit. It's an acronym for spirit and practice. But these small tidbits about how to live your life. And so it's every weekday, every day except Saturday on Facebook and YouTube at I am Rev Melissa. So go check
Hmm.
that out. I am the producer on the show, but I often make appearances, little cameos here and there. Like
Yeah.
I mentioned, I hosted the show myself
Hmm.
the other day
Hmm.
because he was traveling. So that's that. And in these little cameos, I often comment about things that are important to me or things that I just learned. And I talked about smiling recently because I learned in my reading that smiling can have a reverse impact on the brain. Like we know that when
Right.
we're happy, we smile,
Right.
but I found out that it also works in reverse. You can make yourself happy by smiling because
Right.
when you smile, your brain emits these neurotransmitter chemicals that
Hmm.
tell the mind and the body that it's time to be happy. And so if you're in a bad state, you can literally smile your way back into
Right.
higher vibration, as you say. It takes work because when you're feeling bad, who wants to smile? Like you gotta fight for it. But if you
Right.
can fight for it, you can actually elevate your state and get yourself into a better mental space by smiling. So
Right.
that's an important hack for everybody to know.
Right. And that's true. And doesn't have anything to do with that. But it's like a candidate that's running for mayor, right? Every time I see the commercials, I'm like, he needs to smile. Like I support the person, and but it's like, okay, I need to contact them and tell him he needs to smile. And then I always go back to Michelle Obama when she was, I think, when they were first in office, and she didn't smile. And she came off as angry, and they had her sit down and look at her videos, and she saw, and then she shifted and became the Michelle Obama that we
Right,
know.
right.
So that's interesting because that's standing out for me to be true. Because every time I see this commercial, I'm like, I like this dude, but he looks so, actually, he looks a little intimidating. Like, even though he's got a good message, and I'm like, he just needs to be human. Like, he doesn't appear like human. He's human, but not, he needs to lighten up some, so people will like you're more approachable. So that, yeah, so I noticed that.
Yeah. So
And
there's
I
that.
heard that and I thought that was cool. So I'm gonna walk around. I mean, I smile a lot anyway, and then start laughing, and then people get paranoid because they're like, why are you laughing? Like, okay, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? You ever had that experience? Like where you laugh, but it's people think that it's a lot of paranoia. Like, why is she laughing? Did I say something? Like they think it's about them, and it's just because you're happy. And people somehow, sometimes, like I said, there's a lot of paranoia.
Yeah. Well, then we're back to the mind, and I won't go
Uh-huh.
off on a long rant, but the
Uh-huh.
mind generally looks for the negative. That's why the way the mind works. If you got a donut, it's going to look at the donut hole instead of the donut
Uh-huh.
in any given situation. So that's what you're experiencing, the receiving
Hmm.
of that. But just to your point about him smiling and
Right.
Michelle Obama smiling, not only does it affect the inner, as we just talked about, it affects the outer, how people perceive you, and
Right.
your level of warmth as they perceive it is important too.
Right. Hmm.
Eyes are contagious.
And approachability,
Yeah,
and you
approachability.
know,
Good word. Yeah,
need to be looking likable for people to wanna
yeah,
deal
exactly.
with you for the next couple of years, if that may be the case. So I'm trying to think, is it anything else that I did not touch on?
I think that's it. Follow me on social media. I'm at Sekou Writes across everything. That's SEKOUWRITES. And the website for the Hero Hoodies is giveherohoodies.com. Check me out, help me give back. And that's about it. Follow my journey and keep
Yeah,
smiling.
right. And you know, like today is today, and I can guarantee you that next week I'll give you like 2 months, and then it'll be like five more things. Oh, this happened. I'm doing this. So then you'll have to. And so please, in 2 months, you know, when you do these five things that I just told you you're going to do, call me up and let's do it again.
Let's do
Because
it
the thing
again.
is, I'm, you know, people, I'm always like, oh, if he was on my show, come give update. You know, because where are they now? And
Right.
I can truly testify, even though it's my testimony, that I have watched some people. I think I've had my show for, I think it's been like 4 or 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
And where people started, what they were going through that day, and what they told me, and where they are now, or what happened the next day. So I follow that. They may not contribute to being on my show,
Right.
but I kind of is documenting what I deem my show to be about, and that I can say that it's true. Like I met someone, my favorite group, which is Meridian Lights. Of I was a big Prince fan, and I can count how many people I really like on my hand, and those were like the greats. So when I first met them, I said, "You're my number six." And I guess they were like, "What is she talking about?" And I had to explain it. And I'm like, just don't forget me, like when you get your Grammy. They didn't get it yet, but still following them, and they're doing great things in the world. And that's a little shout out for Meridian Lights.
Shout out to Meridian.
If you don't know who they are, check them out. So yeah, so cool. I thank you so much for all you're doing. I have to get, a hoodie and support. It's like, I don't know, my sister, she's doing shirts. I just worked on a project with another guy. My niece, she has a line called Be Your Own Muse, and she's 17. So I'm like, okay, props to you.
Right.
So great. So continue in all you're doing. Follow that impulse that's tugging at you, saying, so, when you're making that face like, what? You want me to do what?
Right.
Just follow that and keep it moving. And I'll catch you wherever you're going to end up.
Well, thank
So I
you. Thank
thank
you
you
so
so much. And thank you for being a guest on the Ketriana Yvonne show. And much success and blessings to you.
Thanks so much for
Thank
having me. I appreciate it.
you. Okay.